everyone. Welcome to today's Spirit Week event, Job Hunt Like a Hacker with Jason Blanchard. I'm Emily Calandranis, the Director of Development and Partnerships on behalf of the NCL, and it's my pleasure to welcome Jason from Black Hills Information Security. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Good. Hey, thanks, Emily. Thanks for inviting me here today to come and talk to your audience about how to job hunt like a hacker.
Perfect. And for just a quick moment, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We have some people who are just joining us. We'll just pause for just a moment, but you'll notice that when you join the live, that there is a chat box. So if you happen to have any questions or if you'd like to interact with other community members, please go ahead and do so. We always love to see where everyone is coming from. So if you want to put your state, your city, what school you're representing, that's fantastic. We love to see everyone represent. And keep in mind that we are going to have about 10 minutes or so towards the end of this event where we are going to have live Q&A. So we're going to pick some questions from the chat box for Jason to answer live. So once again, if you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to put them in the chat box. And also I have my colleague with me, Ashley Dodge, who may be popping into the chat to answer questions as we go. So no more hesitation. We're going to go ahead and jump right on in. Jason, whenever you're ready, the stage is yours.
Sounds good. Thanks, Emily. All right. So hello, everybody. If you could do me a favor, if you can use the actual comments, right? Like I'm used to live streaming. I'm used to like engaging back and forth. Like Jose, thank you so much. Go ahead. If you've never heard me present on how to job hunt like a hacker before, just put the word first into the chat. So if you've never heard this before, just put the word first in the chat, just so I can understand, like, okay, there's a lot of new people here. They've never heard this before. And so this might be like completely brand new to you. So cool. A lot of first here. So welcome. Hello. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jason Blanchard. I am the content and community director of a company called Black Hills Information Security. We're a team of ethical hackers and a bunch of other security professionals that get together and do the thing that we do to help people protect themselves better. Now, as part of the content community director, I create content, build community. But let me tell you, before I got into cybersecurity, I was in comic books and filmmaking. And when I was in filmmaking, I taught at a school called Full Sail University. And the class that I taught was on content producing and content creation. And what happened is that my class was the last class that the students took before they graduated. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in school or a school-like environment like now, generally you don't think about graduation until graduation. And so what happened was at the very beginning of my class, I would say, hey, welcome everybody. At the end of this month, you will be unemployed. And like you could see, I was like, oh, right? It was like a reality check for a lot of people that right now you're a student, but at the end of my class, you'll be unemployed. And so if you're currently in an educational environment, that's going to happen to you too. Is that when you graduate, you are graduating and unemployed at the same time. Yay and crap, right? And so most of my class was geared towards how to find jobs in the entertainment industry. Now, if you don't know about the entertainment industry, generally what happens is that you might work a week and then you're unemployed. You might work 2 days and then you're unemployed. You might work a month and then you're unemployed. You might work 6 weeks and then you're unemployed. You're constantly employed and unemployed. Sometimes you might work for 3 different companies in the same week, right? And so what happened was I had to teach people to be constantly hunting at all times. So the number one takeaway from today, the number one takeaway I want you to take away from this is always be hunting. Okay. So always be hunting. And you're like, I am hunting. No, I don't just mean when you need a job. I mean when you have a job. So if you currently don't have a job, I get it, right? Like you're hunting for a job. But once you get that job, you do not end the job hunt. The job hunt is a part of your daily life. I job hunt 10 to 15 minutes every single day, and I love the job I have. So if you're like, but why would you job hunt if you love the job you have? Well, I job hunt every day because I don't know when that job might end. Either it will end because the owner chooses to sell the company. It might end because they might go in a different direction. It might end because I choose to go somewhere else. It might end for a lot of reasons. And so if it ends, I don't want that to be when I put my resume together. If it ends, I don't want that to be when I start doing a search to build up a network of like-minded individuals who work in the same industry as me, called networking. If it ends, I don't want that to be like, oh, I should probably put a plan together. So I am constantly job hunting. So a friend of mine, actually not a friend of mine, my wife, good. She is a friend of mine and my wife. All right. So that came out weird and now we're good. Okay. So my wife early in her career got called by what's called a headhunter. Now, so this is like a recruiter that is specifically looking for a person that is currently employed who has the skills that they need to come work on a different project or a different company on a different program. So she got the call, right? So she got a call from a headhunter, and the headhunter said, are you currently looking for a different job? And she's like, no, I'm happy with the job that I have. And so this headhunter said something to her that always stuck with me. The best time to hunt for a job is when you have a job. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. The best time to hunt for a job is when you already have a job. Because here's what happens to most people. They lose a job, and then they start hunting. But when you lose a job, you don't have like the most self-esteem you could possibly have. You start questioning your own skills and abilities, because why did I lose my job and that other person didn't lose their job? If you're a student right now and you're thinking like, I don't have the skills to even get a job, like you are not in the right mindset for job hunting when you currently don't have a job. Also, if a job comes along, you're like, I'll take it, like without much thought or consideration. So step number one is always be hunting. And what that might look like is you go to a networking event in your neighborhood. What that might look like is you go to a local conference in your area. What that might look like is you look at job descriptions daily and look for things that you don't quite know yet to give yourself a roadmap of things to learn. Right. So it is a constant tweaking, and like it's not an anxiety prone thing. It's more of a proactive prone thing. So that way I'm not full of anxiety. I'm actually full of self-confidence if it comes along that I lose my job. All right. So with all that said, if you are currently unemployed or looking and you're in the process of putting a resume together, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. Like if you have to build a resume, or you built a resume, or you don't know if your resume is any good, this is a terrible just life experience. I was joking on a live stream recently that I can only imagine like Satan and demons got together and said, hey, I have an idea. Here's a way that we can torture human beings. We can make them, okay, watch this. We can make them figure out how they're going to provide for themselves, their family, and eat. Okay, ready? And we're going to, like, the only way to get a job is to put all their skills and qualifications on one sheet of paper. And then it's got to be good enough to get an interview. Like, we should just ruin their lives, right? And so I don't know about you, but like putting a resume together is just absolutely like anxiety prone, filled with self-doubt and rage. I hate it. I hate it so much that I like, is there a better way? And so the better way that I've come up with, and you're like, he presented a problem and now he's giving me a solution. Yes, I get it, right? Like that's the way that you present things. Here's a problem, here's a solution. The problem is, if we go over here, humans suck at describing themselves. They are much better at finding something that describes themselves. I suck at describing myself. I am much better at finding something that describes myself. And the greatest example of this is if I type in the word Virgo and I look at images, and then I go down here to Virgo traits. So if you can see this on your screen, if you were to like, Jason, tell me about some of your traits, I'd be like, traits. First of all, what is a trait? And then second, like, what are my traits? But all of a sudden I go, I'm a Virgo. I was born in September. Let's take a look at the Virgo traits. So the positive ones: logical, hardworking, artistic, observant, faithful, kind, patient, responsible, reliable, modest. Yes, I would claim those, right? Now I take a look at the negative ones. Ruminative, well, yeah. Critical, sure. Stubborn, wow, okay. Uptight, all right, yeah, I see what you're saying. Worried, people pleasing, like, like the audience right now. Frustrated easily. My daughter was earlier playing the violin while I was trying to live stream, and I was like, you gotta just turn that thing off. Overly independent, irritable, and picky. Picky? Oh, geez. All right. I also agree with all of these, right? But if you were to ask me to sit down, like, hey, what are some of your negative traits? I'd be like, I don't know. Why are you asking me? So if we go back over here, that humans suck at describing themselves, they're much better finding that something that describes themselves. You can only imagine why creating a resume is just like created in the depths of hell for us to be tortured by, because that's what this is. It's a document that describes yourself in a way that gets you paid and food, right? Like, without this, you're not going to get food and money. So the stakes are high, and I don't want to do it. And so I'm going to put it off for as long as I want to. God. So here's the better solution, right? So instead of just trying to figure out what you're good at, go and actually search for the job that you want. Now, this might be difficult for you because you don't quite know what type of job you want. But if you're looking for entry-level cybersecurity things, most likely that's the case. In fact, put in the chat right now the kind of job that you're looking for. So just write in the chat the type of job that you're looking for, and maybe I'll be able to do a quick search for you. So if I go to SOC analyst and I click on jobs, and I put in the whole country, not just the city, not just the state, like I put the whole country in. I'm going to do that so that way I can do all filters. I'm going to go to the past week. I'm not ever going to click on these. That's just going to bring you pain, disappointment, and sadness. And the reason why you don't want to click on these is because the person who uploaded it to LinkedIn did not care enough to actually select the right thing. Because why would they want to limit the amount of people who are going to see their job posting? They don't want to limit the amount of people who are going to see their job posting. So they're just going to select everything or select nothing because they don't want to limit the amount of people who see their post. Right. So that's why you'll see like an entry-level job that's got 10 years of experience with it, because they want more people to see it. And you're like, that sucks. Well, they're trying to fill a position. So remember that the recruiter, the person who's posting this, has a goal in mind, and that goal is to fill the position. And they don't want to limit the exposure of the job. So they're just going to put everybody. And you're like, oh, that's why an entry-level job has so many things. And then we go down here and we're like hybrid or remote, right? So hybrid and remote. And so now we have the 66 results or 81 results. But I don't want you to do this right now. I don't want you to do this right now. I don't want you to actually search for a job right now. So I'm going to reset all my filters here. And I'm back to 1,000. Now, if you want to, you can do minus senior. And in theory, it should remove all the senior level roles from the search. And then you're like, but it's right there. It's a promoted post. And so that gets treated slightly differently. So if you go down and the non-promoted post, you should get to where it works properly. So SOC analyst over here, minus senior. And then you can also do minus SR, and it will get rid of other senior level jobs, not the promoted ones, but the other ones. Now, if we go down here to cybersecurity senior analyst, which you're just messing with me now. We get down here to SOC analyst 3. No, I'm good. And then we get over here to SOC analyst 2. Let's just pick this one. Okay. So for those of you that put SOC analyst or network analyst or cloud security engineer or chocolate taste tester or entry cyber analyst or network security engineer, do a search for those roles. You do a search for those roles. And then remember back to this. Remember, humans suck at describing themselves. They're much better at finding something that describes themselves. What I want you to do is go through the bullet points here and look for anything that is true about you. Look for anything that is true about you. Okay, so you see this: monitor, investigate, analyze, remediate, or escalate indications of compromise or breach system applications. Like if this is true about you, then you would harvest this right here. So you harvest it. You take it over to your document, and then you paste it. All right. So what you're doing right now is you're just building a document of every single thing that you can find that is true about you. Now, if you're like, I'm not 100% sure about this, work closely with technical and actually, yeah, that's good. Let's go to that one. All right. So you respond to inquiries in a timely manner, advising customers on security best practices. You're like, yeah, I could do that. So you're down here. And then we go over here. Advanced use of large-scale multi-tenant SIEM or SOAR environment. If you get to this one, you're like, no, right? You're not applying for this job. You're harvesting bullet points. You're harvesting bullet points. All right. So it's got to be true about you. Analyze threats for unique indicators of compromise. Work with fellow SOC team members to create countermeasures to aid in future prevention and detection of cyber threat. Okay. So let's say that's true about you. And I don't know why they're not all doing bullet points, but I'm not willing to investigate right now. Then we get down here to required skills. Familiar with. Do you see the words familiar with? In the chat, just do me a favor. Write the words familiar with in the chat, just so I can know that you're following along and you're tracking with me. And so write the words familiar with in the chat. This is super important, and I want you to be able to write the words familiar with in the chat. If you're a student right now, this is going to be one of the most impactful things I can possibly teach you today. Familiar with, right? Familiar with. Okay, so familiar with industry standard security tools, NDIH, like some of this stuff I would have to look up. Like I am not actually sure what all these things are. Critical thinker who can analyze skills. Let's stop on this one for a second. Okay, let's go back over here. Is everyone tracking so far with being able to just go in and harvest the bullet points of things that are true about you? If you're following me right now, just say like yes, right, in the chat. Be like, yes, I'm following you. Okay, because I want to talk about this familiar with thing here real quick. All right, so here's what I've learned about job hunters. Job hunters, like I said before, normally you're job hunting when you don't have a job. And so there's some self-doubt there. There's lack of self-esteem there. There's all kinds of things that just kind of go together. It makes things like a huge mush in your head. And you're not quite sure if you're capable or qualified or any of those types of things. Like you just run through and you're like, I just hate this whole process. If that's you, I want to give you a little support and help today. Familiar with. Let's go talk about that. All right. There are 3 levels of knowledge. Okay. And I need you to understand that there's 3 levels of knowledge. And the reason why I need you to understand there's 3 levels of knowledge is because what most job hunters do is that they get to a job description like this. They run through it real quick. They find the one thing they can't do. So they look through all the bullet points. They find the one thing they can't do, and then they disqualify themselves from applying for the job. I don't know if that's you, but what happens is most job hunters look through a list, find the one thing they can't do, and then they choose to not apply for the job. Okay, so if that's you, stop it. Stop it. Because what most people do is they're like, well, there's something here I can't do, then I must not be able to do all of it. And so in the chat right now, if 100% is all the bullet points and 0% is none of the bullet points, how many bullet points do you think you should be comfortable with or familiar with or experienced with before you can actually apply for a job? How many? Like 100%, 0%, 50, 70, 80, 20, 30? Like go ahead and put in the chat what percentage you think you should have in order to apply. So we got 60, 75%. Got those are coming in right now. All right, so let's talk about the 3 levels of knowledge. Okay, so the first level of knowledge is familiar with. Let me give you a definition of what familiar with means. I've heard of it before. I took a class on it. I researched it. I think I know what it means. All right, so that's what I want to give you a definition. So, because what most people do is they see the words familiar with or critical thinker or understand the structure. And what they do is they make an assumption that there's someone out there that is more familiar with it than they are. That Alvin, you might think that Brian is more familiar with this than you are. Or Jimmy, you might think that Faith has more experience with this than you do. Or Veronica, you might think that Brian knows this much better than you. So what happens is that we in our heads go like, well, like I've heard of that stuff, but like I'm not an expert at it. And you start thinking you have to be an expert at it in order to apply. It says the words familiar with. So we go back over here. Familiar with means I've heard of it before. I took a class on it. I researched it. I think I know what it means. So over here, if you come across something that you're like, I have no idea what that is, go watch a webcast on it. I'm being serious. Go watch a webcast on it. Go watch a YouTube video on it. Like learn exactly what NGFW is. Learn exactly what AV. Learn exactly what FIM is. Learn it in a webcast. Watch it. Give yourself a framework of all the things that you need to learn. And here is why. Because when you get this job and they ask you about WAF, and you go like, yeah, I've heard of that before. Because imagine they ask you about WAF and you go, what? Yeah, WAF? I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, oh, okay. We got to go way, way deep and start from scratch. But instead, you're like, I'm familiar with that. I know exactly what that is, right? They're not asking you to be an expert, proficient, or anything like that. All right, so the next one is proficient in. So whenever you see the words proficient in or experience in, right? Like there's a familiar with, there's a proficient in, like there's like, it's hard to quantify this data. So I'm trying to give you like some way for you to know if you're proficient in something or not. I use it on a daily basis. And if you really want to know if you're proficient in it, I know the shortcut keys. I thought I was proficient in Excel. I've used Excel for 26 years. I've used Excel since the 90s, right? And I use Excel, but someone asked me recently, can you make a graph? And that's when I realized I don't know Excel. I'm familiar with Excel. I'm not proficient with Excel. I'm proficient with a lot of things, but I'm not proficient with Excel. So if you're like, I wouldn't put on my resume proficient with Excel. I would put knowledge of Excel. Do you see the difference? You see the difference? Okay. So proficient is I use it on a daily basis. I know the shortcut keys. I don't know about you, but every once in a while I'm like, can I do this without using the mouse? And I'm like, all right, so it's shift control, and like, can I actually use this program without using a mouse? And if you're like, no, I've never thought about that before. Well, I have. Okay. All right. And then lastly, expert in. The one thing I know about people who are experts in anything is that they know they're not an expert in anything, right? It takes wisdom to know you're not an expert in something. The issue is your resume is not the time to be humble. The resume is the time to quantify your level of knowledge with the things that you have. So expert in, let me give you a definition. I know it so well, I could teach it to someone else. I know it so well, I could teach it to someone else. Not that I know it so well, I could teach it well to someone else, because teaching is a skill all on its own, but I know it well, I could teach it to someone else. Meaning, here, sit down next to me, and I will teach you exactly how to use this program as best as I possibly can. All right, so that's an expert in something. And so from now on, when you go back over here to these and it says understand the structure and meaning of logs, does understand the structure mean be an expert in this? Or is it more of a familiar with? Or is it proficient in? Or let's say you are good at this, right? Let me show you a practical application of this, okay? You get down here, it says understand the structure, familiar with the structure. Do you see how you just changed? You have this information, you've made it accurate, that you're like, I am familiar with this. I'm familiar with the structure and meaning of logs from different. Now, what do we change? Proficient in. structure, proficient in the structure and meaning of logs, expert in. Do you see how this changes your level of knowledge? So as you're building your resume, as you're gathering together all these things that you're comfortable with, shift and change to your level of knowledge and comfort that you have in these things. Does this make sense so far? If yes, put the words yes into the chat. And for everyone that was like 50%, 80%, 70%, 75%, 70%, 40%, right, for what you should know in order to apply. That's right. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's the right answer. If you come across a thing, a job that you would like to apply for, please apply for it. Because the other thing I want to teach you today is this. Don't say no on behalf of someone else. What happens is when you come across a thing that you can't do, or you only have 70% of the bullet points that you're capable of achieving, and you choose not to apply, what you're doing is you're saying no on behalf of them. You're like, oh, well, I'm not good enough, or they're not going to want me, or why would I apply? They're just going to say no anyway. Possible. Or you can apply and then let them say no. So do me a favor, stop saying no on behalf of them and allow them to say no on behalf of them, or allow them to say yes on behalf of them. But there's no reason for you to say no on behalf of them because you're not them, and stop. Okay. So back over here to the SOC analyst position, right? So we go through here and we harvest, right? We harvest these. Ability to work weekends as required and be on call. Can you imagine putting that in your resume? Just like, hey, I just want to let you know right now, I have the ability to work weekends and evenings as required and be on call 24/7 to serve as the escalation point for the team. Fantastic. Now, before I wanted to cover more of this, but are you able to grasp this, like harvesting bullet points? Because there's one last thing I want to do is tell me any school that you go to. So put in like a university or school, or like give me a link to a class that you've taken on cybersecurity. So like a link to a class on cybersecurity would be super helpful. All right, so I'm going to go with the University of Montana. All right, and I'm going to go to cybersecurity and see what I find. So cybersecurity bachelor's degree program, University of, all right. So we go over here and they're going to undergraduate cybersecurity management certificate, graduate certificate. Yeah. All right. And then jobs for majors, degree, cool. Actual testimonials, cool. Right. Like they're doing all these things to promote themselves and say, hey, we got here. So let's go over here to other cybersecurity degree programs. Let's go over here to this. All right. And do they let me click on the courses? All right. So what I want to do, and it doesn't look like I'm able to click on the courses for this, but let me show you what I would do. All right. Try one more. That's not what I want. Oh, course catalog. Page not found. What are you doing, University of Montana? What are you doing? All right, let's go to WGU Cybersecurity. This is going to work once I can actually get to it. WGU Cybersecurity. And we go over here to bachelor's degree. And we go to cloud computing. And we go down here. All right. So whenever it says, should you choose a specialization, and it gets down here to cloud computing course, foundational program guide. You get down here to foundational program guide, and you look through here. What I want you to do is start harvesting. If it says the students will learn, whenever you come across students will learn, that's the most important part. Students will learn. Then what I want you to do is take all the things that they say students will learn and then put it on your resume of things that you learned. Does that make sense? If you have a certification and it says, if I go over here to the CompTIA certification, CompTIA Security Plus, right? So I go over here to CompTIA Security Plus. No, that's not what I wanted. No, not at all. Go over here to CompTIA Security Plus, and it goes down here to the what skills will you learn? If it says what skills you will learn, then can't you say you have knowledge of these things? Yeah, you can take it from the syllabus. You can take it from the syllabus and you can say students will learn, and then you can flip that around and say knowledge of this, 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 and this, right? So you can take what they're going to teach you and you can say, this is what I know. And same thing with any certification that you come across is that if they say you're going to be able to do these things, then you can say, I have knowledge of doing these things, right? Because it's a certification. It's not you actually doing the things. It's that you have a certification in the things. And so that is very different. I have knowledge of, I'm familiar with, right? So that is where you put that in your resume. So I could go over here and take these words, these key words, and then put it into my resume and say, I have knowledge of these topics or familiar with these topics. All right. Before I run out of time today, I want to give you something that's very, very important to you, right? Something very important to you as students. So if you're a student right now, please put the word student into the chat. If you're not a student right now, well, hello, this is going to work for you too. It just doesn't work as well. So students and veterans and people transitioning out of the military, this works about 9 out of 10 times. And you're like, really? 9 out of 10 times? That seems like a lot. Well, I mean, if you like really run the numbers for a very long time, like probably 9 out of 10 times. But to cover my butt, I'd say it works 50% of the time. If you're not a student, I'm going to say it works about 10% of the time. And you're like, well, that's a big difference. All right. So 50% of the time, what I'm about to tell you is going to work. 10% of the time, it's going to work for people who are not students. All right. So what happens is, if you go over here, right, like in LinkedIn world, and you type in a company that you want to work for. So let's say in the world of cybersecurity, what's a cool company to work for? Binary Defense, right? So we put in here Binary Defense, and then we click on Binary Defense, and we go over to it's got 200 employees, and we click on People. Now, if you didn't know, you could actually click on People over here, and it would show you all the people that work at Binary Defense. Now, here's what a student can do. All right, this is what a student can do that not everyone else can do. All right, everyone follow along? Here's what a student can do. A student can reach out to anyone here. All right, follow along. A student can reach out to anybody here. So we go over here to Deborah, Director of Proposals Operations. Now, her messages are locked. I always take a look at the contact info here, see if there's any email addresses or something. You can do the connect, right? Like a connect and add a note. Here's what your note's going to say. Hello, Deborah. I am a student at the University of Montana. I'm looking to get a degree in cybersecurity, and I see that you work at Binary Defense. Would it be possible to talk to you for 10 to 15 minutes and find out how you got to where you are in your career, and what advice would you have for someone like me? I'm going to run through that one more time. You can reach out to anybody at any company in the entire world and ask them, hi, I am so-and-so from this school. I'm getting ready to graduate in 2 years or 1 year or 3 years or 4 years or next week. I'm graduating, and I wanted to find out how you got to where you are in your career and what advice would you have for someone like me? So Deborah, if she uses LinkedIn, so I'm going to show you real quick. Go down here to show all posts and see when was the last time she actually used LinkedIn. It was a year ago. It was 6 months ago. Deborah is not a good example. So don't send a message to Deborah. Okay. So let's go back over here to the list. And we'll click on Joe. And then looks like Joe can send messages. So I can just send a message to Joe. That's cool. Anyone can send a message. Head to Cybersecurity Services, connect. I could do that. You could send a message to Joe. But let's take a look at Joe's activity feed to make sure that Joe is actually using LinkedIn. And as of 3 months ago, right? 3 months ago, that's where it was. But look at this. He actually just posted a role to work at Binary Defense. Oh, look, he posted another role to work at Binary Defense. So by going and clicking on people's names and going to their profiles, Chief Technology Officer, Jason Vest. We go down here to activity, and see that his activity is from 3 days ago. All right. So 3 days ago, Jason Vest, messages are locked, right? So I can't just send a message here, but I can connect if we know each other. I can add a note, and in my note, I can say, hello, Jason, other Jason. I'm getting ready to graduate. I'm a student at, and would it be possible to talk to you 10 to 15 minutes to find out how you got to where you are in your career, and what advice would you have for someone like me? Here's why this works for students. Because all of us who've been doing this for a while, when we get a message from a student, we go, oh, look at them. So cute. Just wanting to learn and get out in the world. It's rough. Wow, it's rough right now. Maybe if there's something I can do to help them. I wish I had someone there for me when I was getting ready to graduate. So sure. Let's set up a time to meet. This is my person to reach out to do my scheduling. Here's my Calendly link or something like that. And then you set up the phone call and show up. Show up to the phone call. Don't get all weird and like, why would they want to talk to me? You know, we go back over to this. Don't say no on behalf of someone else. Don't say no on behalf of Jason. Don't let you talk yourself out of why Jason doesn't want to talk to you. All right. So you send a message to Jason. Jason then replies back and says, all right, let's go ahead and set up that 10 to 15 minute phone call. And here's what you do. You introduce yourself, and then you ask the question, how did you get to where you are in your career? They're going to talk the whole time because finally somebody cares enough to know. And so they're going to talk the whole time. What you're doing is listening for anything that might be useful to you. At the end of the phone call, this is the most important part. Ready? At the end of the phone call, here are my 2 takeaways from today's conversation. You let them know what your 2 takeaways were from the conversation that you just had. Out of all the things they said, what were the 2 things that were the most important to you? And then once you've told them your 2 takeaways, here's how I'm going to apply this over the next couple of months. Okay? So you're going to say, here's how I'm going to apply this over the next couple of months. And what they're going to hear is someone who cared enough, who listened, and is applying. And then, as they're listening, it's like, would it be possible to follow up in a couple of months? And who would say no to that? To a person who listened and cared and is trying to apply that information. And so if you're currently a student and you're like, so you're saying this works? Yes, it works. A high school student took me up on this. A high school student, okay, a high school student who liked cybersecurity took me up on this. He put together a list of CISOs and CTOs and CFOs and CEOs of all these companies, and he just reached out as a high school student. His name is Sully. So Sully Vickers reached out to all these people, and now he's a cyber researcher and developer at Leidos. He's a student. He got like a job before he graduated. Like he was getting offers to come work at companies as an intern or a worker because he was just introducing himself to people. He was saying, here's my 2 takeaways. Here's how I'm going to apply it. Would it be possible to reach out again in a couple months? And all of a sudden people are like, I see you. I see the potential in you. I see the skills and abilities that you have. Do you want to come work here? Like he didn't ask for a job, but the jobs were being offered. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? If it does, say yes. If it doesn't, that's fine. All right. So I was told I have 40 minutes. I tried to give you as like a crash course in the 2 most important things I could tell you today. And that is 1, how to harvest things that are true about you, how to gather all this stuff together into one document. And then what do you do with it? Right? Like once you gather all that stuff together, like what do you do with it? Well, you go to your own LinkedIn account. You then go to where it's applicable and then you drop all that stuff in. This is what it looks like when you are done. You put all this information into your LinkedIn profile, and then you use it to build your resume. For sure, you use it to build your resume. And if you didn't know, most of you should have this option if you're in the United States, where you can go to the More tab and you can say Build Resume, and then you can say Create from Profile, and then you can give it a job title. And so I'm a content strategist. So let's just put that. And then it will build your resume for you. And you can see what it looks like where it takes every single thing here, right? So it takes your entire LinkedIn profile and it builds your resume based on that. Now mine's 8 pages long because I've been doing this for 26 years. Yours doesn't have to be 8 pages long. It can be 1 page long, and that is totally fine. All right, so back to Emily. Emily, if you want to come back and ask questions, thank you so much. Hopefully the 2 takeaways were the main thing was just go harvest everything that is true about you, including past jobs. If you worked in restaurants, harvest that stuff. If you've been a teacher, if you have any kind of certificate, harvest the things students will learn, or people who have this cert will have this knowledge. If you have any of your curriculums, take that. Here's what we will cover this semester, and take that and say, I have knowledge of these topics. And then lastly, reach out. For the love of all that is good, please reach out to anyone that you want and ask them, how did you get to where you are in your career, and what advice would you have for someone like me? And then let them know you were listening and apply it, and then follow up with them over and over and over again. All right, Emily, what questions do we have?
Terrific. Thanks so much, Jason. That was incredibly insightful. And I have to say, I've been job hunting for a very, very, very long time. And I've learned things even just listening to your presentation myself. So thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and jump into a couple of questions. The first one is, and maybe you don't know, Jason, but we're gonna send it your way. How important are certifications versus degrees, and does the degree matter?
Yeah, so for the most part, recruiters are filters. They're filtering out the hundreds of applications they're getting. And the job market right now, I haven't seen it this bad, because what happened was roles were eliminated. So roles were eliminated. Recruiters were eliminated. And so the recruiters who are left, who are trying to fill the roles that do need to be filled, are being inundated with hundreds and hundreds of resumes. And if you're like, oh, it's true. And so what I like to do is, if everyone is sending a resume to a recruiter and putting a cert on there, I'm always thinking like, well, how can I get around that? Can I go straight to the recruiter? Can I reach out to the recruiter? Can I call the recruiter? Can I run Facebook ads targeting the company and the recruiters that work there? Like, I'm always like, how can I get around what everyone else has to do to get the job that I want without thinking how, like, so when you're like, does the cert matter? Does the degree matter? Think about the recruiter, right? The recruiter is doing the best they can to find the right applicants to give to the hiring manager, so the hiring manager can go through that and figure out who they call in. So that's what a cert and a degree is. It's a base level knowledge that they can go, oh, I've heard of that before. If you didn't know, you can actually do a search for jobs based on certs. So if you want to share screens again, I'll show you. If you go over here, the nice thing about CompTIA is that it's CompTIA. So if you go over here to CompTIA and then you do a search for jobs, it will list the 7,076 jobs that are currently looking for some kind of CompTIA cert. GIAC or CCNA, so if you type in, CCNA, it will give you all the jobs that are currently looking for CCNA, right? Like currently that's those. So what you can do is type in the cert. Security Plus doesn't work because there's too much, like the word SEC is in too many things, and so that doesn't work. But like all the GIAC certs, the GIAC, if you do a search for GCIH, you can find all the certs that are looking for the GIAC certified incident handler. So sometimes just do a search. Like if you do have a cert, do a search for that cert and then find the jobs that are currently looking for that cert. Does the degree matter? Does the cert matter? If everyone has certs and everyone has degrees, then what can you do that's different? That's
terrific. Awesome advice.
I would say.
Thanks, Jason.
Go back to that whole thing of humans suck at describing themselves. They're much better at finding someone to describe themselves. Just imagine that 90% of the people that are applying for that job just really sucked at describing themselves. And so they're submitting. If you're applying for a role, please tailor the resume to that role. Don't have a resume that you put everywhere. Have a resume for every job you apply for. And that's going to start cutting down on the need for certs and everything else, because you're like, hey, I have the skills and the abilities. I'm literally showing you I have the skills and abilities. What most people do is they have a resume where they describe themselves poorly, and then they put it everywhere and then wonder why they're not getting interviews.
All awesome. Right. Thank you. The next question is from Carlos. What job boards do you use aside from LinkedIn?
I like LinkedIn as my starting point. So LinkedIn's my starting point, but I job hunt very, very differently. So the way that I job hunt is I normally put a hit list together of the companies I want to work for, and then I go that route. And so the way that looks is top companies thriving in 2024. And so I do a search for the companies thriving in 2024, and I start looking at, do I want to work at a startup or a corporate environment? And then I start putting a hit list together. So top startup companies thriving in 2024. So I'd go to this list of companies thriving. I would take a look through it and say, like, what's CradleWise, or what is, what is StackBlitz, right? So what is Linktree? Like, so I would start looking at what companies are thriving and doing well. And then I would put together a hit list of companies I want to work for, and then I would start applying at those companies. And so if I wanted to work at Fandom, let's say Fandom was a company I wanted to work for, and I type in the word Fandom here, and not jobs, companies. So go to companies, and then we find it's a technology company. And then I go over here to jobs, and I see, like, are there jobs here? There's creative producer, copywriter, a couple of jobs here. But then I'm going to skip right over here to people. I'm probably going to find the CEO or CFO or something like that, vice president of communications, director of community partnerships. Like that's the guy I want. I'm going to go over here, and I'm most likely just send a direct message directly to this guy, Brian. Contact information, nothing. So I'm going to connect with, hey, Brian, currently looking for a role at Fandom, something like that. Okay. So if you're like job boards, like I job hunt very differently. I go for the companies I want to work for, and then I pursue the people who work there, and then I introduce myself to those people there, and that's how I get jobs.
Terrific. All right, the next question is from Tatiana. The question is, what advice would you give to applicants with a disability that can still do the job?
Yeah. So what I've learned over time, and I'm a disabled veteran. I have a 10% disability, and most people would never know. It's a IT band related issue, and so it's not much of a disability to me being able to perform my job, right? So I'll start right there. But what I've learned is there's the way that you talk about it, and you can take the screen down. The way that you talk about that will be the way that it's perceived. If you have a gap in your resume where you went back to school and there's like 4 years where you didn't work, the way that you perceive that gap is the way that it will be perceived. And so if you see something that will negatively impact you, then it will most likely negatively impact you because of the way that you talk about it. So a friend of mine, she is in her 60s. She worked somewhere for 20 years. She took care of a family member for 2 or 3 years. And so that's why she was out of the workforce. And now she's getting back into the workforce. And she's like, how do I explain this? And I was like, well, for the last 3 years, you've killed it in every single hack the box challenge. You've killed it and tried to hack me. You've learned everything you could possibly know about cybersecurity over the last couple of years. I don't see that as like an employment gap. I see that as a refocusing and relearning opportunity that you have to now bring 60 years of wisdom with you into this new role, right? So that's the one thing that not all new hires have, is the wisdom that comes from age of being, like, I've made a lot of mistakes and here's all the things I've learned from, and now I'm applying them in this new role.
Thanks, Jason. The next question is, how to not disqualify yourself from a job application being an international student?
All right. So international students is hard. I'm going to let you know right now, being an international student trying to get a job in another country is difficult. Some large companies actually have recruiters specifically for that. All right. So when I told you to go to the company, click on people. If you do a search for recruiter, so here, let me show you real fast. All right. So I'm going to take you to a large company. So let's go to CrowdStrike. That's a large company. When I say large company, I mean it has a stock ticker, right? Like it's got a ticker on the stock exchange. So we go over here to people, and they have this feature here where you type in recruiter. All right. What you're looking for in the recruiters, right? So it's got all these recruiters here. It's got 125 different recruiters. You go through the list, and what you're looking for, it's either entry level recruiter or like new hire recruiter or college outreach recruiter or something like that, because they will have recruiters at those different phases of people in their career. And so like EMEA sales recruiter, vice president, global talent acquisition. Like, remember, you're a student. You can reach out to anybody in the whole world and ask them any questions, right? So you can go over here to these. And so what you're looking for is there a recruiter that is designated to my type of situation? All right, so that's step one. Is there a recruiter dedicated to my type of situation? Number two is I'm going to ask you to become an expert, and I do mean an expert, on international labor laws. Read as much as you possibly can about what it would take to hire you in that country. So if you want to work in the United States, you want to work in the UK, you want to work in Germany, wherever it is that you want to work in, understand the international labor laws of how to hire you. Because think of it this way. If you're coming from another country and you want to work at a medium to small company in the United States, and you're like, hi, I'm coming from this country. I would like to work for your company. The person who gets that email goes, whew, that sounds like a lot of work for me to figure out. But if instead you send an email or in your resume, you say, I have a lot of knowledge in international labor law. If you want to hire me, I will give you the step-by-step procedures. I know exactly how to set up the bank account. I know exactly how to do the agreement. I know exactly how to do those things because I researched it and learned it. And so you don't have to do those things. I'll do it and to help you help hire me. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. The next question is, how do we utilize the list of attributes that you were building on that Google Doc? How do we use those attributes in the format of a resume?
Sure. So if you go over here to a job description, let's do SOC analyst. And go to jobs. And let's just say we're going to apply for this one. Okay. All right. The role. So what I like to do is just take all this stuff here and take this, copy it, go over to a new document, blank, and then paste it. And then what I'm going to do is essentially structure my resume in the same structure that it has here. I'm going to use the job description as a roadmap of how I'm going to talk about myself. So it says here the Senior Operations Center. So let's see if I can do this real quick because I know I'm running out of time. All right, so I go over here to ChatGPT, and you're like, really? You're going to go to ChatGPT? Yeah, I'm going to go to ChatGPT. Write this in the first person and reduce the word count to 50 words or less. All right, and lately, I just have to hit refresh, and then it normally comes up. An error occurred. Don't do this to me, ChatGPT. Okay. All right. So what I'm doing right now is I'm saying go here, turn that intro part. Here we go. As a senior security operations analyst in the CSOC, I lead a hybrid team detecting, triaging, analyzing, responding, and reporting cyber incidents. I mentor junior analysts, perform advanced. All right, my role demands adaptivity. All right. So you go back over here, and this isn't perfect, right? It's not perfect, but it gets you started. So you change this here, right? You go here to Jason Blanchard, and then you go here to this part here. We're going to drop that in. We're going to do that. Take this. We're going to bold it. Do this. We're going to go over here to email, and then LinkedIn, and then phone, right? And then what I'm going to do is go through here and start to grab all the things from that list that I made and start putting them in the order of how they want me to describe who I am, right? So I'm going to use the job description as a roadmap of where I put all the things. And if you're like, what? All right. So it's weird. It's not going to say, here's where I worked and here's the things I did. Here's where I worked and here's the things I did. Here's where I worked and here's the things I did. I'm going to actually just list my skills and abilities in the order that they ask me for. And then when it gets down to qualifications, experiences, I'm going to list those things too that make sense. And then what I'll list is my work history and anything else that I think is relevant, my education and stuff like that. Because what are they asking me for? Do you have skills? Do you have experiences? And I'm like, yes, I have skills and experiences. Does it matter where it came from? Does it matter that it came from an educational institute? Or does it matter it came from an employer that paid me to do these things? Like, I have these skills. Now, some recruiters hate this crap. Some recruiters will come back and say, like, okay, we're going to give you an interview, but I need you to give me a traditional resume that says, here's where you worked and here's what you did. Here's where you worked and here's what you did. And you're like, no worries. I can do that for you too. But I've seen this get more interviews than I've seen the other traditional resume get interviews. That's my observation. It's not the only observation. So there. Yeah.
Exceptional advice. Thanks for walking us through that. Extremely, extremely helpful. I want to make sure we wrap up with the questions. Thank you, everyone, for the questions that you asked, and thank you for sharing the answers, Jason. But before we go, I want to make sure that people know how to reach you. Where can they see you? Where can they see resources that you recommend? So if you want to do a little plug, please do. We would love to know how we can stay in touch with you.
Yeah, so once a week I do a job hunting live stream on Twitch. So twitch.tv/Banjo Crashland. Banjo Crashland is just a mixture of Jason Blanchard. So this is how every single week, Tuesdays at 10 a.m., unless I'm traveling, I get together and I talk about some. You can go here and see the recent recordings of how to job hunt like a hacker. So you can watch those and catch stuff that you might have missed. And so I would recommend doing that. I'm also the co-creator of a game called Backdoors and Breaches. And so if you've never heard of Backdoors and Breaches, it's a great way to learn cybersecurity. And so you go to backdoorsandbreaches.com. And so if anybody here wants to get a free deck of Backdoors and Breaches, just go ahead and reach out to me, jason@blackhillsinfosec.com. I'll go ahead and put it in the chat here, jason@blackhillsinfosec.com. And so if you send me, I will, oh, darn, that is not right. I missed the C at the end. So blackhillsinfosec.com. Just go ahead and send me an email, and then Deb, my coworker, will make sure that we get you a free deck of Backdoors and Breaches. So I am the co-creator of Backdoors and Breaches. It's helped teach, thousands and thousands of people how to do cybersecurity. So that's the kind of stuff I do. I create things, I make stuff, and I help teach people things. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. And we could not be so great, any more grateful for you to be here. This was amazing. We had fantastic feedback from the audience. And thank you for making this one of our awesome events for Spirit Week. We really appreciate having you. And for all of those that are here today, tomorrow is the last of the Spirit Week events. We are going to be having the award ceremony at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then right after that, we're going to have Q&A with the game creators, AKA the engineering team of Cyber Skyline. So we hope that everyone joins us. We can celebrate the community, wrap up a really amazing spring season. And once again, Jason, thank you for your time, your expertise, and your humor. I had a great time. I think everyone in the audience had a great time as well. And thank you everyone for joining us. This will be sent as a recording. So when you signed up for the StreamYard, it will just automatically send you a link to watch the recording in just a bit. And thank you again, Jason, and we hope to have you with our community soon.
Thank you, and thank you.
All righty, take care, everyone.